From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Wednesday in March, opening day eve, John. We are a day away from the start of the Orioles 2025 campaign. Still several days away from the Orioles home opener, which is scheduled for Monday, but I don't know if you've taken a look at the weather report yet, John. Doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good.
That's why they built in that day off after the home opener, so that they can push the game back if they need to.
I feel like they did that 2 years ago, I believe.
They did it up at Fenway a few years ago, I think.
I remember that. That was challenging.
Yeah.
Logistically.
It's happened like twice in the last 4 years.
Yeah, they did it here 2 years ago. And but that was also I feel like the next day's forecast is almost just as important because if it's going to be maybe thunderstormy, but then it's going to be 70 degrees, you just wear it.
Yeah.
And you just do it.
Yeah.
But I'm thrilled that this off season is almost over. As we were talking before we were going, that I'm trying to figure out what my season preview column is going to be. And there are literally no more words left to write about what the Orioles did and wanted to do and tried to do and have done this off season. There are many more words to speak as we're about to do. But it's just I keep being fighting the urge to be as I said 15 times. Unfortunately, I'm going to say a 16th time. And
I mean,
thank God it's over.
The offseason is kind of interminable, and spring training is long as heck.
But I will say, let's just get this part out of the way. It was a lot different than the off seasons where they signed one major league free agent or two major league free agents and do nothing. Stuff was happening the whole time, and there's a sliding door where sure, maybe Blake Snell is whatever, I don't really care about living in Baltimore, I'll take your $35 million any day of the week, thank you. And this whole offseason turns out differently. But I feel once it got on the path that it was on, every time they nailed a sign to a tree on that path, it was here we go, more of the same. And it was really challenging, and I'm thrilled that it's over.
Yeah, the one difficult portion about the MLB offseason, which is obviously different from salary cap leagues like the NFL, is you don't know when it's going to end. The offseason just stretches into spring training. Yeah. And with the NFL at this point, I mean, Stephon Diggs just signed yesterday, but most of the big guys are already off the board because teams know how much money they have to spend. Players know how much money they're going to get. And these big guys fly off the board. And for the Orioles, it felt like we kept saying, well, they haven't gotten an ace, but there's still time. They haven't gotten an ace, but there's still time. Now we are up against the start of opening day. Not time. The Orioles have not gotten an ace. And the thing is, they can still get that guy. They can't sign him in free agency. They could trade for that guy from now until July 31st, the trade deadline. We're going to talk about today what the Orioles did in the offseason, why we think that this team might be better than expected, because we've seen a lot of criticism on social media about the Orioles offseason, and I think it's kind of negatively influenced the way that people view this team. And you compound that with the bad second half that the Orioles had last year and the quick 2-game sweep at the hands of the Royals last year. And I think people are overly negative about this team. And so we're going to give our predictions at the end of the show, but we're going to also talk about why we think this team might be better than what people think.
Yeah. And I think as I'm going to just keep talking about this column. It's not written and hasn't been written, and it's going to be available soon on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe for 6 months for $1.
There it is. A little backwards, usually $1 for 6 months, but it's in there.
That's not the first time I've done that. It feels like this team and the roster and the players are being judged or penalized for stuff they have nothing to do with, which is the cadence of this offseason and the moves that Michael Elias and his team actually made.
Yeah.
I think there's a real, I think there's plenty of reasons or ways you can be critical of this offseason. And I also think that has nothing to do with the team itself. Yes. And when would we have been sitting here, if we were theoretically sitting here, how far back do you have to go to think of all the excitement there was amongst Orioles fans for a time when their lineup would be Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, Jordan Westberg, Jackson Holiday.
Yep.
plus Cedric Mullins and Ryan Mad. Like, this is what people wanted for a very long time. This is what got people through a lot of like really, truly terrible on purpose baseball. And this was the whole point. So the idea that you can hold the decisions of executives against like this team, like yes, what they did will impact whether the team is good or not. But like, when I hear people tell me like, oh, this is like the least excited I've ever been about a season, I'm just like,
I've heard that a lot.
I don't know what that means. And I do know what that means. It means that like they did not meet the benchmarks that person set for the offseason. But like, baseball is not about the offseason. Like, there's a long offseason because it's a 6-month season and playoffs. And then, it's a long offseason, but like, that's not, I don't know. That's really not what this is about. Like, this is about like the guys on the field who are largely good and largely like homegrown and exciting. And like, if we're sitting here this time next year and having the same conversation, then like, shame on us and shame on the Orioles. But like, I don't really think this is like something to not be excited about. And I hear that and I just wonder why. And I think it's because there's like a conflation of the offseason moves by the front office and like the players on the field. And I think those are pretty separate.
And I also think people today, especially, are so quick to judge players' careers and write a narrative about a player's career so early in their career. I mean, it feels like Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson have been here forever, but you also have to remember that they've been to 2 postseasons ever. And if they get swept again in the playoffs, then we start talking about a trend. But let's pump the brakes on that. Let's not write these guys narratives just yet. Let's wait to see what their careers are going to produce. And I think that there's a lot of good that's going to come out soon.
Yes.
All right. Before we get into our predictions and such, John, we got a review.
Oh, wow.
We got a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you write us a 5-star review, I will read it out here in the show. And Matt W821 says, glad to see Paul is back in the O's podcasting game. Thank you. Thoughtful analysis seasoned with some occasional insider info. Looking forward to tuning in throughout the O's 2025 demolition of the AL East. I like how Matt is thinking. And if you write us a good review, give us a thumbs up, all that good stuff. It really does matter. So please do that. All right. Before we talk about predictions, before we talk about Kyle Gibson, who we haven't had a chance to talk about, let's talk about real quickly what I saw yesterday at the Orioles ballpark tour, which is a new-ish and improved left field wall. It is not yet done completion. The Orioles have not released all the information about what's going to be behind said wall, but we do know that Mr. Splash is getting an extended platform. I got to participate, role play as Mr. Splash yesterday. Video coming on our Baltimore Banner Sports channel.
Wow.
Yeah. But John, this wall to me is going to be a fascinating conversation all season long because of the right-handed hitters that the Orioles have, because of the powerful left-handed hitters who can go the opposite way. And got a first look at it yesterday. I think it's going to make a difference.
It feels like it will. I feel bad for the pitchers that are going to end up giving up cheapos again. But they, it's easier to pitch knowing that happens, knowing that you might have like a 4-run lead, but when you're on the mound, because your offense will be, your offense will be able to carry it. It's interesting, like the cadence of this, like it clearly happened quickly. That the decision they made, and like they're figuring this out on the fly. It seems as to what that space is going to be. If we're talking about being glad that like the offseason is over, like again, let's get this wall into play. Like, let's just do this.
Yeah, I saw one of our comments. I posted pictures of it on our Baltimore Banner Sports channel on social media, and I asked what people thought of the wall, and the top comment was, what I think about it is I'm already sick of seeing photos of it. So I think people between the 2022 wall change and the current wall change, I think people are sick of hearing about the wall at this point, but we got to talk about it because it's going to make a difference.
It's going to make a difference. And I think that, I think it's just a strange thing to like, it's just a strange thing. Like the less you think about it, the better. And like, it's hard not to.
It's an example of the Orioles being just different in every way. All right, let's talk about one of the pitchers who could be affected negatively by said wall, Kyle Gibson. Our old friend is back, John. 37 years old, agreed to a major league deal with the Orioles a few days ago, worth $5.25 million with $1.525 million in guarantees, according to our own Andy Kuska. Quick refresher on who Kyle Gibson is for those who did not watch the Orioles 2 years ago or choose to forget that they watched the Orioles 2 years ago. 7 years with Minnesota, season and a half in between with Texas when he was an all-star, and a season and a half with the Phillies before signing that 1-year deal with the Orioles in 2023. Last year was with St. Louis, a 4.24 ERA in 30 starts. He struck out 8 per 9. In many ways, it was an improved season last year over the one that he had 2 years ago. So if you started to think that Kyle Gibson was falling off when he had a 4.74 ERA with the Orioles 2 years ago, he took some slight steps back last year. He is going to be an innings eater. We know that about who he is. But the timing of this deal, John, was interesting for a lot of reasons because they have added a lot of depth to their rotation this offseason, a lot of older guys to this rotation. And Kyle Gibson, who was not with a team in any big league camp, was signed off the street with a week to go before the start of the season. Interesting.
Yeah. And this is adding another, I think, like, it's like not a building block, but it's like not a movable piece, really. Like, yes. I'm sure there is a completely outlined plan. There's a whiteboard somewhere that says you're going to pitch on this day. You're going to go here this day.
Yeah.
Here this day. You like the Orioles know when he's going to be available to them.
And it's not right now. He's not starting the season on the opening day roster. He's going to go down and build up his arm because he did not have a spring training and presumably join the Orioles in maybe a month.
Yeah. Or I think I saw somewhere like targeting May-ish, but like if Chase McDermott and Trevor Rogers are both starting a throwing program around the same time and like doing the same kind of stuff, like that's a lot of depth to come available at that specific time.
Yeah.
That is in addition to, you would think, Grayson Rodriguez probably a little later than that. And then further down the line, you have Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells. You have a lot of experience with Kyle Gibson. I think that, you know, you always can tell the reaction of the players when, like, I think I saw every Orioles starting pitcher like reposted like "Welcome back, Kyle Gibson" post. They love him, and like they don't do that all the time.
Yeah.
I think you take that into consideration, and you just kind of it's a move not for the sake of making one, but I think that the Orioles were very, very negatively impacted by their lack of preparedness for any number of rotation scenarios last year. That's why they had to make the trades they did. That's why they spent July not being a very good baseball team. And this is just another way to combat that, even though the timing feels weird, not just the signing, but like when he will be available and like how that fits in with the larger picture.
Yeah, it was kind of talked about, discussed. You know, Andy wrote about the possibility of bringing him back as when Grayson Rodriguez went down with his injury. And he was at Nationals Park the other day throwing from distance that looked about 90 feet. So he is building back up. The Orioles still believe that he's not going to miss an absurd amount of time. So that it was always kind of rumored as a possibility because the Orioles loved what they had in him a few years ago. You know, he was a guy who just ate a ton of innings on a 101 win baseball team, mentored the young guys, was a steady veteran in that clubhouse. The thing is, he is a little bit superfluous with what they have right now because they signed Charlie Morton and Tomoyuki Sugano. They have those guys right now that are already steady veterans, they think, in the clubhouse right now. I think there are a few readings I got for why the Orioles did this, and I'll give you 3 of them.
Okay.
The generous reading, I'm being overly optimistic about this reading, is that Mike Elias does not want to be caught flat-footed because, like you said, John, last July and August, they got hit with a ton of injuries. They had to make a panic trade for Trevor Rogers. I'll just call it what it is. They had to add so much depth at the trade deadline because an absolute calamity hit their rotation last year with Tyler Wells and John Means and Kyle Bradish and then Grayson Rodriguez at the end. It was a disaster. The Orioles are going to go out of their way to make sure that that doesn't happen. And now that they have a little bit more resources from David Rubenstein, they're going to sprinkle $5.25 million here to make sure that they are not caught in that same spot again. That's my first reading of it.
Yes. I think that's fair. I think that there's not a scenario where like that's not the case. Even if there's other stuff going on, that is the case.
Yeah.
He is very samey to the guys we talked about. We talked about like if you average out, like if you have like 7 number 3 starters and you have an average rotation. Like,
Yep.
that was a dumb joke and like not a threat when we said it a couple months ago, and here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are, with that exactly playing out. He is also, if we're being completely honest, like insurance against those samey guys. If Charlie Morton needs to have a few weeks off because he is not as young as he was when he started his career, if the workload at some point catches up to Tomoyuki Sugano, like, that is
every 6 days.
Yeah, Zach Eflin has spent time on the injured list over the course of his career and with the Orioles last year. Like, this is a very like high floor, and I think there's different ways to look at that. Like, this is a high floor like cover for any of that as well. I don't know that there's any. I'm not going to make like a connection between like what this says about guys who were expecting to come back later. I just think that this is like a very samey solution to a potential problem if the Orioles rotation depth gets challenged in the sense of any of the older guys not being what they think.
Yeah, so I think that's a little bit more generous. If I'm going to be a little bit more, put on my tinfoil hat and be a little bit more conspiratorial, an alternate reading of this would be the Orioles saw what Albert Suarez did in spring training, which was 19 earned runs in 21 2/3 spring training innings, and they don't believe that he can repeat his production last year if somebody in their rotation goes down, because we said it all offseason. Albert Suarez is the best insurance plan. He was great last year, 3.6 ERA between the rotation and the bullpen. He's going to be 36 this year. Maybe the Orioles don't believe that he can produce that same thing and that same output, and I think that that's kind of a fair assumption.
I believe we wrote, and like it was part of the spring training like discourse that Albert Suarez was in. Brandon Hyde kept talking about how great shape he's in and how looks like a different guy. He was driven. We also got to see over the course of a season that like Albert Suarez throws hard. Like, he's like not some kind of like junk baller, but he is someone who, it's not like a great fastball on its own. It's not great stuff on its own. It's his ability to locate and his ability to put the ball where he wants to and like pitch to a plan. Like, that's not really something you do in spring training. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is like the margins are very fine of like putting a baseball where you want to when you're trying to throw it, 60 feet from, to like a very small spot. Like, if your body is different, if anything is different, it's not going to be the same as you want it to be. And there could be an adjustment period, I guess, if we're talking about like the downside of like what this could possibly mean in a bad way for him. There seems like there could be a possibility that like, because he is physically different, like the things that he is good at are not as sharp as are not what they want him to be. And I think that is something that is, we could look at his spring training stat line and be concerned. And we could also look at it and say, you can't really do what Albert Suarez does well in spring training. He did it well last year. So that's kind of contradicting myself, but like they know if he is trying, if Adley or Gary Sanchez or whomever is behind the plate and be like, I'm trying to, if Adley's coming back, like he hit that spot last year and he's not hitting it now. Like, they have metrics, they have that type of stuff. They know. And I think, Cade Povich won that rotation job. Like, let's call it what it is. He won it. I don't know. And I think Albert Suarez also didn't win it. I don't want to say he lost it because like whatever, but like he didn't win it. And there's a reason for that. So I believe that they are probably very well in tune with whatever's happening there.
Yeah. Third reading on this, John, and this is really the tinfoil hat time. Are they sure Grayson Rodriguez is going to be okay? He had a cortisone shot in his elbow a few weeks ago. Like I said, he is seen throwing again. The Orioles don't believe that they at least publicly say that they don't think that he's going to be out an absurd amount of time. But we are right up against opening day. He's not going to make the opening day roster. You talked about cadence with the offseason. If the Orioles were not concerned about Grayson Rodriguez, if they were not concerned about Albert Suarez, why wouldn't they have made this signing a month ago and given Kyle Gibson a month to get ready for the big leagues? Because now that he is a month behind, it's going to take him an extra month. And based on what the Orioles have said, it's possible that Grayson Rodriguez could be back in the rotation in about a month, which means there wouldn't be a spot for Kyle Gibson in theory.
And that's where the challenge is. I'm the world's leading elbow skeptic. If you tell me like something ligament wise happens, like I'm not gonna do the dance with you that like, oh, we're gonna do PRP and oh, we're gonna let it rest. Like, just like let's not kid
Rip
ourselves.
off the
Like,
Band-Aid.
it's not my arm to get surgery on, but like whatever arm we're talking about is going to get surgery. So like,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I go. Again, it doesn't seem like that is this, but if we're asking the broad question of like, do they think they can rely on Grayson Rodriguez to be what they want him to be? I'm not sure what the answer is to that. This is somebody who's had a variety of physical issues over the course of the last few years. And if we're talking about the timing maybe not being what something that makes sense on the surface, like maybe they think they're good without, knowing they have Albert Suarez as depth. They have a lot of off days in April. So maybe this is like, all right, we're going to get to a certain point in Grayson's rehab where either he's good or he's not.
Yeah.
And like, we don't need to push him through if it's not good because we have Kyle Gibson here.
Right.
He's coming back probably on a similar timeline as a Chase McDermott, as a Trevor Rogers. Like, instead of being sitting in the offices down in Sarasota and being like, well, if Grayson's not okay, we'll just have Trevor Rogers bump into our rotation. Like, you could say, okay, if you believe in Trevor Rogers and if you think there's like stuff to do that made that better. Or you could say, what if we didn't do that? What if there was something better or a little more reliable to do? And if we want to go the Grayson Rodriguez insurance route, I think it's more like, I would say it's less they think something bad is happening now than they think we could get to him pitching in Norfolk at the end of this month or early next month and say, I don't know. And like, then whatever, take another rest, like figure it out. We got Kyle Gibson.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about the Grayson Rodriguez injury as a big factor, but I think the Chase McDermott and Trevor Rogers injuries were just as influential of this move, because those are your depth guys. And not only the problem is with those two guys, especially, is they need development. Those guys, we saw only one spot from Chase McDermott last year, but ideally he would have had a full spring training to get to the point where he's building off of that one start that he made in the big leagues last year, and he's advancing his game. Trevor Rogers, 4 not great starts in Baltimore last year, went down to AAA and velocity was not great. Let's be honest, he needs more time. And if he would have benefited from having a full spring training. So not only are these guys behind injury wise, but I think ideally the Orioles would like to develop them further. And that's going to take time.
And sorry, and just to interrupt, which I'm doing, Chase McDermott also made that start, and I believe he made one appearance in Norfolk right after that. Went down for a while. He got back towards the end of the season, but like, Cade Povich had the opportunity to come up, make some starts, like go down, work on stuff, come back, be better.
Yeah.
That never really happened. He didn't get the opportunity to be like, okay, you were in the big leagues. Here's what happened. Here's what we're working on. He didn't have that opportunity in the second half of last year, and he didn't really have it in spring training. So like, if you are thinking about his development, you are thinking about it being a longer lead thing than him being somebody you're trying to count on for rotation depth right now.
Absolutely. All of this just reminds me so much of what the team that Kyle Gibson was on last year, the St. Louis, different Missouri team, the St. Louis Cardinals did last year, where they went out and they signed 3 of the oldest pitchers on the market. It was Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, and Sonny Gray. And I think a lot of people are looking at what the Orioles did this offseason and comparing it, because they signed 3 old pitchers. I mean, Tomoyuki Sugano, Kyle Gibson, Charlie Morton have been around the block. I mean, Tomoyuki Sugano has been in different blocks in different countries, but these are 3 older guys. And so it's great that the Orioles have reinforced that floor, but obviously there's still that big hole at the top of the rotation.
And also just signed a ton of like Cardinals guys.
Yes.
Like,
Kittredge,
Tyler O'Neill, previously a Cardinal, Dylan Carlson.
Yeah. A lot of connections.
A lot of Cards connections here.
All right. Let's look ahead to this current season. Let's talk about our predictions, and we'll finish with our record. I have we wrote about on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. We gave our predictions for most valuable Oriole, for breakout star, for top rookie, for a record, for how far this team would go in the playoffs. And we're going to start with most valuable Oriole. Gunnar Henderson won it in, we don't get the vote totals, but I would say a landslide last year, put up 9.1 WAR, which was more than twice as much as the next closest guy, who was Corbin Burns, who finished in the top 5 for Cy Young and still had 3.5 WAR.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody who votes on most valuable Oriole votes based off WAR. I think there are some people who are probably not as analytically inclined.
However, they're not listening. We could talk about them. We're not going to, but we could.
We could. I would have a hard time predicting that if Gunnar Henderson is healthy for most of the season, he won't produce similar results. What did you think, John?
I think you're right. I think Gunnar Henderson is going to have the best season out of anybody on the Orioles. I don't think that's particularly close. And I picked Colton Cowser as my most valuable. Why? Because if Gunnar Henderson is 85% of like last year's Gunnar Henderson, he will probably still be comfortably the best player on this team. And he will also be worse than he was last year.
Sure.
Which is not a real perception thing, but is a real thing. And if you want to believe that Colton Cowser is going to be a better hitter, like a more consistent hitter this year, because he basically had like 2 really good stretches and some stretches that were not very good in between. So if you think that like he is going to I don't want to say level that out, but like raise, make the slumps a little less pronounced.
Yeah.
Get a couple hits in big spots with runners in scoring position. If you think that's going to happen, you're talking about a much better player and like somebody who's going to probably not be Gunnar Henderson level of value, but like, or production, but it's probably going to be like close to Adley Rutschman level of production. And like at that point, you are in the conversation, and these awards are silly and they're voted on by people who think about things in maybe not the same way that other people do. And I think if there's like, if we're talking about an ascendant Colton Cowser and like a 85 to 90% as good as he was last year, Gunnar Henderson, I think that's a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I should not be casting shade on anybody who votes not based off WAR, because 2 years ago I put Felix Bautista, I think third, the season that he lost the final month, because he was just so important to the team. But closers don't generate a whole lot of WAR. But everybody who watched the 2023 Orioles could tell how valuable he was. So I think if Colton Cowser finishes with 5 WAR and Gunnar Henderson finishes with 6.5 WAR, but Colton Cowser hits more home runs and takes such a massive step, I think he could win it. I mean, also WAR is a metric, but there are 2 versions of WAR, which tells you that it is somewhat subjective. It is not exactly empirical.
Yeah. And we're talking about like the difference between like a 920 OPS and like an 850 or 860 OPS, which is like real. And like also, I mean, it's significant, but it's also not like a huge difference. Can I tell my stupid MVO voting story before we?
Yes.
Okay. So 2017, it would have been Jonathan Scope won it, I believe.
I think he did, yeah. That was the year he was the All-Star.
Yeah, and like there was a lot of consternation on the beat that he was not the unanimous choice, but like that was when I was at Sun and my beat partner at the time. That it was like the end of August or like early September when the votes were, and the team was like falling apart basically. But it was Manny Machado was like red hot, and like we were basically like gaming it out like, if he does this for another month and this team makes the playoffs, and because Manny has like the like a September from like another planet, it's going to be kind of dumb if he's not the most valuable Oriole. So we split our votes. We both did like first, second, like Scope, Manny Scope. And it turned out obviously not to be the case. I don't think they won many, if any, games in that September.
That was a horrible September.
I believe the amount was 3. It was either 3 or 6 wins. It was a low single digit amount of wins in that September. That theory did not ultimately end up holding any water, but like people were so mad that Jonathan Scope was not the unanimous MVO, and we were like, oh, I don't know where his hot dog suit. Like, we're all trying to find the guy who did this.
I wonder how many votes Tim Beckham got that season for the incredible August that he had.
He was good in that month.
That was one of the best months I've ever seen.
Yeah,
he was scorching hot. All right,
his helmet kept falling off. Remember that?
Yeah, that was what a season. Until September. All right, our breakout star for this one, I honestly wanted to pick Jackson Holiday, but Danielle Allentuck already picked Jackson Holiday, and I didn't want to overlap with her. I think there are so many reasons Jackson Holiday, former number 1 prospect, former number 1 overall pick. He's stronger. He's faster. He's going to take a massive step.
He's going to do stuff.
He's going to do stuff this year. He's going to take a massive step. Yeah. So I think, honestly, Jackson Holiday is the safe bet. I picked Heston Kjerstad just because every time we've seen him in the big leagues, he has been good. And even when he was dealing with concussion symptoms last year, he has been solid. He had 253 with 4 homers in 39 games, 745 OPS. So he really obviously has not had a whole lot of time to, get ready for big league baseball. He's never broken camp with a team. Now he has. And I think he's going to play a lot, probably platooning a lot with Tyler O'Neill probably DHing a good amount. I think that he's going to have a massive season from the left side of the plate.
Yeah, and I should at this point have the number in front of me, but like the month or so before he got hit in the head with that pitch, he had like an OPS over 1,000. Like he was taking over in part, even though I don't think the Orioles anticipated he would end up being out as long as he would. But like I feel like part of the reason they traded Austin Hayes was because like they saw what was happening. Like Austin Hayes had already lost a lot of it back to Colton Cowser, and he was about to lose even more to Heston Kjerstad. Like that is the part of his season last year that I focus on, and I really think that's a very good pick. For the sake of transparency for our listeners, whenever we do any kind of roundtable or anything like this, I'm the last one to enter my answers. So like my answers are similarly influenced like Paul's were by like, oh, so-and-so took somebody. I think Jackson Holliday is a great choice. I think Heston Kjerstad is a great choice. And for all the reasons I described in my last answer, I picked Colton Cowser.
That's wild. I think that I think there's a very good chance that he is an all-star this year.
Yeah, and for last spring when he was like starting to look like, it was very clear that he was looking like a different player, and he'd done a lot of work. And I called his hitting guy back in Houston who was saying that he spent the whole offseason putting together like basically like making bets with people that Colton Cowser would be a 2025 all-star. Like not last year, like he was like next year he will be an all-star. And I think about that all the time because, you know, that is not something to build like predictions around, but like he was a really good player for most of last season and he was situationally challenged. And he's going to end up being, I just think he's going to like flatten out like maybe the good times won't be as good and the bad times won't be as bad. But like if we're talking about somebody who thinks he can use the whole field, with left field being a little more of an option at Camden Yards now, somebody who has learned a lot of those lessons, who is bound to not be as poor situationally as he was last year. Like there's just so much upside. And I think there's a lot of guys who are already all-stars on the team. If we're thinking about guys who aren't yet, that's mine.
A year ago, I, at this time, would not have thought it would be higher than a 5% chance that Jordan Westburg would be an all-star in 2024, just because it's so freaking hard to be an all-star in the American League in the infield. And for those of you who might be listening to this and wondering, Colton Cowser is an all-star, that might be a little early, might be a little crazy. It's highly possible. I mean, he has the talent. I think he has the defensive chops at a smaller left field. I think it is very possible that he takes that leap forward.
If he has an 8-something OPS and like 15 bombs in June, like he's going to be in that mix.
Yes.
That's just how it's going to go.
Yeah. All right. Our top rookie for this one, you have a couple options here. Jackson Holliday no longer has rookie eligibility, so he can't be considered here.
Yeah.
I put Tomoyuki Sugano in here because, first off, how fun would it be if he is the oldest rookie of the year ever in Major League Baseball? I think the previous record is 33. He's 35. Would be wild.
Yeah. Dennis Quaid didn't win it when he was the rookie.
No.
As the old man.
Yeah. Did not win the rookie of the year, but I think he was the same age. I think he was like 35 in that story, which is based on true story, but in the movie too.
And like you have to go back a long time for somebody to even debut in the big leagues at this stage in their career, which is absolutely wild. But I think that's a good pick. Do you think that will be held against him? The fact that he is like one of the most decorated pitchers Japan has ever produced, and like, he is not by definition, like he's going to be up against people who could theoretically be not his children, but like who would call him like Uncle Tomo.
I mean, I think very possibly. Obviously, he has way more professional experience than a lot of these guys who are going to be getting votes for Rookie of the Year. But if we're just talking pure rookie, and we're not including that, I think that the guy who's going to make his big league debut this season is the best one is going to be Tomoyuki Sugano at the end of the day. I mean, if he stays healthy, I think that I think there will be an adjustment period, but he showed pinpoint control. He keeps the ball in the yard. I think there's a lot of reasons why he'll be good for the Orioles this year.
I'm really fascinated because like we saw certainly in the second half of last year, there's like a real big appetite for like old school hitting and like, just like slapping the ball around and like, not doing what the Orioles did. Yeah. Like, people in general want to see that. And like, I was thinking like, I wonder like, obviously, if he's good, people are going to like him. But like, are people going to appreciate him more because he's not just some guy who's like having the catcher set up in the middle and like throwing as hard as he can and like we'll see what happens. Like
and just walking guys, but trying to miss bats like a Blake Snell.
Yeah. Like I think we're talking about a binary proposition here. Like if he is good, people will like him. If he is bad, then he will be like used as a bat to beat Michael Elias over the head with. Like that's what's gonna happen. So like, but like I just wonder if the style will make him more popular if he is good.
Yeah. All right. Who is your top rookie, John? Because I was a little surprised by this pick.
Yeah. Well, again, picking last. Not a lot of candidates.
You can overlap.
Yeah. I went with Samuel Basallo. Just on the theory that if he gets up to the Orioles anytime in the second half, probably the early in the second half, to be eligible for this, he would have to have been really, really good in AAA, which would mean that he's going like ready to make an impact. And like that is the type of profile that can make an impact down the stretch if given the opportunity to. So it was more just like not covering my behind, but like if that happens, it will be hugely impactful. I don't think there's a world where he like comes up and like sits on the bench and plays once a week and gets like the Heston Kjerstad like 2023. Like you're kind of here, like you don't really need to do anything more in AAA. Like that doesn't seem like what's going to happen to me. It feels like it'll be more of like Gunnar Henderson-y, where like it's like, all right, like whatever, like you're here, you're just gonna play and like please be good.
Yeah.
So if that happens, I think it will be the most impactful rookie performance for the Orioles this year.
What would have to happen for him to get that opportunity, though? Injury to Gary Sanchez or Adley Rutschman?
No. Injury to Ryan O'Hearn or Heston Kjerstad.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, and not no. Yes, and is what I meant to say.
Sure.
Yeah, we do improv here. I mean, I think the Orioles would have to think long and hard if they were going to be like, you need to come up and be the big league catcher for 3 days a week.
Yeah.
If it's more than 3, I don't know that they do it. If it's 3, okay. But if something happens to Ryan O'Hearn and or Heston Kjerstad in August, and you're saying we could, maybe this is all moot if Dylan Beavers ends up hitting like 30 bombs in AAA and like maybe he's ready, but like more likely if you're like, we need a left-handed bat, let's just do this. Like he can maybe catch sometimes late in games if we're winning by a lot and we want him to catch major league games. But like, I think there would be a real serious conversation where like, let's just do this. Like, why not? If we need somebody to DH against righties and like play a little bit of first base or not just DH against righties and like, you figure it out around there. Like, I think you just do it.
Yeah.
I think you just do it. I don't think that that's a thing that this team does. They don't typically just like YOLO it with like 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
Although they do more than you would give them credit for. I just think you do it. If that happens, I just think you do it.
The Orioles also don't have right now the depth in the minor league system, I don't think, in AAA that I can think of a guy who would replace Heston Kjerstad or Ryan O'Hearn if they were to go down.
Yeah, sorry. They just did the break camp rosters for Norfolk, and I will look at it, and I don't think there's an answer.
That's a position that they traditionally have loaded up on. I mean, Lewin Diaz isn't walking through that door to be Rick Pitino. And
that's what Ryan O'Hearn is.
Yeah.
That's what Ryan O'Hearn is. Like they basically were like, let's just like, we can kind of do this with hitters. Like, let's just get a bunch of guys. Yeah. Josh Lester was one of those guys too. They made a lot of
Franchi Cordero.
John Lester,
he's not walking through that
not
door.
the guy I'm talking. Josh Lester's right.
Josh Lester.
Okay, yes. Yeah. Remember when Franchi Cordero hit like 1 home run for the Yankees and everyone was like, these idiots.
Yes. Yeah. When he hit 412 in that spring and then got cut and then went to the Yankees and then was great for 1 game and then ended up cut anyway.
Yeah, that guy doesn't exist. The infielders in Norfolk's break camp roster are TT Bowens, not left-handed.
Yep.
Nick Gordon, not a corner guy. The Machine, not a corner guy. Taryn Vavra will play first base for the Norfolk Tides this year, but like not that kind of guy. Kobe Mayo, right-handed. Luis Vasquez, shortstop.
Yeah.
Dylan Beavers, left-handed hitting outfielder. Daz Cameron, I believe, hitting outfielder. Dylan Carlson will be the guy, as I'm saying this, that gets called up in that situation if something happens to either of those guys. So like just playing myself, he will be the guy that gets called up in that situation if he's not up already. Point stands though. Yeah. Not going to change it just because I'm wrong.
That's a great way to go through that. Also, how frustrated, this is on a sad note, would Kobe Mayo be if a first baseman went down and they don't call Kobe Mayo and they call Samuel Basallo?
That would be really frustrating. I feel like that would be, but the same thing. Like if we're talking about Ryan Mountcastle going down at this point, they will not call up Samuel Basallo. They will call up Kobe Mayo.
They will call up right-handed hitting. first baseman.
That is one of the many reasons why, like, anytime I talk about guys who end up getting to this specific position, like of being like ready and still in AAA, like I basically preface everything I say with like apologies to Kobe Mayo. Like, sorry, this is just kind of how it's going.
Apologies to Dylan Carlson from us for, basically forgetting he exists.
And he could not, like, we're talking about spring training stats, but he was basically an automatic out against righties for most of his recent time as a major leaguer. And I think he hit righties really well in spring training. So that's just something to watch.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about our predictions for how far this team goes. You and I were both on the upper end of the spectrum in terms of win-loss record.
Yeah.
You picked 93 wins for the Baltimore Orioles. I picked 95. We both have them losing in the ALCS. I picked the team. I said the Boston Red Sox just because they seem like the trendy pick right now. I have no idea who's gonna make the playoff. But let me make my case, because other people predicted them to win 91 games, fewer than 90 games. And I saw a lot of the comments that were negative about the Orioles on our post about this.
Yeah.
And here is my case. Here is why I truly believe, I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid, why I truly believe that the Orioles are going to be much better than you would expect. And I do think that they absolutely did not have a perfect offseason. I think they should have gotten that ace. I think they should have tried harder to get Corbin Burns back. I understand the losing Anthony Santander, but here's the ways in which the 2025 Orioles will be worse than the 2024. They will not have Corbin Burns, and they will lose Anthony Santander. That's it. Here's the ways in which the Orioles will be better this year than they were last year. Jackson Holliday will be better. I can personally guarantee that. Adley Rutschman will be better. I can 99% chance guarantee that. Colton Cowser will be better. Another high probability outcome there. I think that Gary Sanchez will be an improvement off James McCann, at least offensively. I think that Cade Povich is going to be a lot better than he was for the majority of last season. I think they have more rotation depth. I think they have more bullpen depth. And they have Felix freaking Bautista replacing Craig Kimbrell in the bullpen. There are so many ways this team is going to be better this year than they were last year. They lost Santander, who hit 44 home runs. I get that. I think they're going to replace him in the aggregate with Heston Kjerstad and with Tyler O'Neill. I think that they have replaced everybody but Corbin Burns, and I don't want to discount that because Corbin Burns is a massive, massive piece, and they will miss his presence in that rotation. But I think that they're better in just about every other conceivable way than they were last year. But I could be completely wrong. That bullpen could fall apart. That's the only area that really concerns me. I just see them as a much better team, much more experienced team. And I don't see the kind of collapse that they had in the second half of last year happening again.
Yeah, and I'm largely with you on a lot of that. Yesterday's newsletter was basically like, this team will go as far as their offense takes them. Like, that's not to let the pitching staff off the hook. That's not to say that like the pitching staff is good enough. Like, I think it's going to be fine. But like, fine is just close to like bad as it is to good. Like, when you're in the middle, if you think it's going to be good, like it being a little less than that is just being fine. And like, I think it's going to be fine. There are all those ways they can be better. And we've had this conversation a lot of times on this podcast, which is basically me just saying the same thing over and over again. Like, when they were good, they did certain things really well. They matched up offensively. They matched up out of the bullpen. And when you do those things and you're getting 5-ish innings of fine starting pitching, like, you can win a lot of games. I thought last year's Orioles team was going to be better than the year before and win fewer games, and that's what happened. I think this is going to be a better team, and they're going to probably win the same-ish amount of games, and that's all well and good. And like, we're talking about like getting to the playoffs, and like they need to win a playoff series at the very least for this to feel like it matters at all.
Yeah. I mean, look at the second half of last year. They go 500 after the All-Star break and then lose 2 games immediately, which they score 1 run to the Kansas City Royals. Yeah. And it was a disaster in a lot of ways. I just don't see that happening again. And I think a large portion of it is because they should be healthier than they were last year. At one point, I posted a graphic last year of all the guys that were on the injured list. This was September 7th. Here were all the guys that were on the injured list: Felix Bautista, Kyle Bradish, Danny Coulomb, Heston Kjerstad, John Means, Jorge Mateo, Ryan Mountcastle, Grayson Rodriguez, Ramon Reyes, Jacob Webb, Tyler Wells, Jordan Westbrook. That's 12 guys. That will not happen again this year. And if it does, the Orioles are cursed and nothing matters anyway because they have somehow offended the baseball gods.
Yeah.
That can't happen again.
And let's talk about what did happen in that stretch. You know, the pitching staff ended up being fine. Like they made a lot of bullpen trades that largely worked out. They added Zach Eflin, who really helped their rotation significantly. But like the lineup was not a representative Orioles lineup. When we talk about what they do when they are good, I think a sign that they are not doing the thing that they do when they're good is that like when you're just running out there, you're running like Levon Soto and Emmanuel Rivera out there every day, no matter what, because you don't have the ability to match up. When Ryan O'Hearn's playing first base every single day, like he was exposed in that. Like these guys were not.
Eloy Jimenez was getting at bats.
Yeah, these guys were not like there was no flexibility. You weren't putting everyone in a position to succeed. You were putting them in a position that you needed them, and I think that's kind of like splitting hairs, but not really. Like those are things that the Orioles are going to do and be able to do in a way that will benefit them this year. And I think that's the type of thing that like when you take a team, if you want to look at the Orioles roster right now, we don't know what the opening day roster is, but like there were times last year where there were players you would say like, this is not somebody who should be playing on a playoff team.
Yep. Austin Slater, Eloy Jimenez didn't make the playoff team.
But yeah. Roles, whatever. Like maybe some guys should not be in the role that they will be in or will be overqualified. Like, I don't think you're going to be able to look at the roster they put out tomorrow and be like, what's this guy doing here?
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be anyone who fits that bill on that roster, like, period. And like, that's the starting point. And you're talking about a full rotation's worth of like major league caliber pitchers who are not on the opening day roster that are in this organization right now.
Yep.
You're talking about, I don't know what the bullpen depth looks like, but I think that
that's the only
they figure it out. And they also like spent the entire spring like having their scouts target guys who are going to get put on waivers at some point, and they're going to just end up being good here for 3 weeks and then they'll move on.
Yeah.
Like that's how that works. I think there's just a lot more downside protection than they had last year. And that's kind of the whole point of this.
Yes. I think that the bullpen is the only part that scares me because how quickly we forget that Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez did have their hiccups after they were traded from the Phillies to the Orioles. They had some moments where people wanted them gone.
Yes.
They figured it out by the end of the year. But those are two kind of immovable pieces who are kind of expensive in that bullpen. They did lose Jacob Webb and Danny Coulomb, two of the more underrated relievers that they had last year. And there is a slight chance, let's be honest, that Felix Bautista is not going to be himself to start the year. So he's not going to step in and immediately be the 2023 Felix Bautista. So I think there are ways in which that bullpen gives me, some sleepless nights. But I also do think that, one, we saw them fix the bullpen midseason last year, and like there were some hiccups, but it worked. Yeah. It's something that you can do. And two, I think that with all that extra rotation full of arms that are coming back in theory between Tyler Wells and Kyle Bradish and soon Grayson Rodriguez, I think that will shuffle more of those guys to the bullpen so that by the end of the year, they'll have a lot more depth. If everybody comes back as expected, I think that they'll be able to fix that bullpen. It doesn't concern me too much.
Yeah, there's more major league talent on the pitching side than they will know what to do with. And if that's the case, that's like, I'm sure they would welcome that.
Yeah. And I don't want to let this front office off the hook for not getting an ace. You lost Corbin Burns and you didn't replace him. But I keep pointing back to the 2017 Astros who won the World Series. They traded for Justin Verlander in the middle of the season. It's possible. I think it is a failure that they did not get an ace this offseason. But I think that will hurt the Orioles more if they get to the playoffs and don't have an ace than it will during the regular season.
Yeah. And they also won the World Series again in 2022 with like Framber Valdez and Jose Urquidy, and I'm forgetting someone in their rotation who they did not trade during all those years that they wanted to.
Exactly.
That they were trying to win more World Series, and like it's like a lame way to end, but like that's what they know. They remember all the times they could have traded those guys and didn't.
Exactly.
And that informs some of the things that have happened here recently.
All right.
Weird way to end it. I don't know why I said that.
No, it's okay.
Can we delete it?
No.
Okay.
Can't. It's out there for the internet to see. Now that we've gotten that off our chest, we could be completely wrong. They win 80 games and we look like idiots, and you can play this back.
Here's a fun way to end it. Better way.
Yeah.
This team has like somewhere between 70 and 90 pending free agents. imagine if this goes completely to hell, like the trade deadline sell off.
Oh my God. Don't think about it.
Just
that way.
imagine trading all of these pending free agents in the span of like a week in July. All the graphics you'll have to make, all the getting to know like prospect YZ from
that would be horrible. Let's not think that way.
Just think about it. That would be tremendously bad for everything about our lives, but it'd be great content.
It would be great content. Look, I'm not going to say that it wasn't exciting when the Orioles started their rebuild. It came after a lot of losses, but at that point, the Orioles had lost so many freaking games in the first half that I think a lot of people were in 2018. I'm speaking about.
Yeah,
I think fans were just looking for anything new. Let's just hope the Orioles are in a much better position at this year's trade deadline than they were 7 years ago.
Yeah.
8 years ago.
I don't know why. I was driving out to a Delmarva game on the trade deadline that year. Yeah. And I kind of thought they were done because like they'd done all their stuff. And I was like, everyone's getting fired. Like you should leave like Kevin Gossman and like Jonathan Scope as like a present for the new front office of trades. So I was driving out like on one of those like, roads that go out to Salisbury and like all of a sudden like my wife was when we were going to go to the beach. Yeah. And I had to pull over. I was like, oh God.
Brad Brock, Jonathan Scope, Darren O'Day.
Get them all out.
All gone. We won't have that this year, John. I'm guaranteeing we won't see all those guys go out the door.
Yeah.
Because they're already out the door. Thanks so much for tuning in. At Paul Mancano is my handle. At John Meoli is his. Thanks for following along all off season. We are finally up against the start of the regular season. We were going to continue this podcast throughout the regular season, try to get you at times multiple episodes a week. I don't know, John, don't worry. I'll employ Danielle and Andy and Kyle Boone to.
I got one ish in me. Yeah, sometimes more than one, sometimes less than one.
So we're going to keep you updated all season long, and of course follow our Orioles coverage all season long because it is going to be a long, potentially exciting year for Baltimore Orioles fans. Thanks so much for